think this is now the 5th webinar that we have done in conjunction with the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce. We're proud to be silver partners of the organization. You guys have been a longstanding client of ours, and this collaboration, frankly, something Russell and I look forward to every month. And this month, we wanted to tune in on something that everybody listening has access to, but I can almost guarantee you're really not using it. And that's a shame, because this is a free tool. It's included in your Microsoft 365 licensing, and it's called Sharepoint. And Russell and I are going to get into this a little bit. Some of you have a little PTSD about Sharepoint. You worked at a company where it was a nightmare to navigate. And we're happy to tell you it is a much easier platform to utilize now. And there are just so many great little nuanced items for collaboration and moving to digital and storing. Storage is one of the best things about it, or creating a repository where somebody can send you a massive file of data that you don't want to necessarily just transmit through an email. But I don't want to steal any of Russell's thunder, so I'm going to introduce my colleague, my good friend, and my lead engineer at Advantage Industries, Russell Smith, to walk us through some of the wonderful capabilities of Sharepoint that you're probably not aware of. Take it away, Russell.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Allie and Courtney, of course, for organizing this. So yes, I like that little introduction, Mike. It's not your parents' SharePoint. It's come a long way. So if you've used it 5-10 years ago, it was a very different experience. And I think it's a lot easier for folks to use. It's a lot easier to build. It's easier to set up. Everything about it is a lot easier than it was a few years ago.
And simpler.
So if you took a look at it a few years ago, we said, take a look again. If you were burned by it a few years ago, take a look again. And we've learned a lot too. So we're a lot better at helping people get comfortable with it. So,
and I just want to point out real quick, one of the reasons that Russell and I decided to do this presentation is SharePoint development is probably the #1 project that clients come to us about.
Yeah.
And also, and Russell I know is going to get into this, but we will have people say to us, well, I need to replace my server. Mm-hmm. And we'll say, well, have you looked at what SharePoint can do to offset some of those demands and needs? So let's dig in.
Yeah, so without spoiling too much, we believe it can save you a lot of money too. And that's always something we're a fan of. So going to SharePoint could save you thousands of dollars. So hopefully that'll perk your ears up. So what is SharePoint? Well, very simply, it's Microsoft's web-based collaboration platform. It is, and the thing is, it is tied to the Microsoft ecosystem. So we'll see how that works a little bit more, but it is tied to your email. It is tied to the Office suite, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all those good things. So the nice thing is, if you're already using Microsoft software, which most of us are, it's built in. That functionality is baked in. You're not having to train new software a lot of time. If your staff is using Word, they're going to keep using Word the same way they are now. They don't need to learn something new. We'll get into that. It's also an intranet site. So it's an internal website for your organization. You can also think of it a lot like a server, like Mike said. And we'll drill down each of these things, but it houses documents. And just like a server, it also houses applications that you may utilize in Microsoft's cloud. So we've done a webinar on Microsoft Teams. That's actually a front end for SharePoint. SharePoint's sort of the engine underneath the hood of the Teams car. Also does things like integrates with email, integrates with Office, integrates with OneDrive storage, and even some of the more sophisticated business intelligence tools, accounting packages, everything in that Microsoft ecosystem.
Yeah, and I want to just a real quick one on that, Russell. Mm-hmm. You just went through a lot of different Microsoft applications.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you've got the 365 license because you bought it for your email and you wanted to be able to use Excel, there are all of these other great features that are included in that. Now some of them are a little based on, which license you have, which we did a few months back and talked to you about which license do you have and why. But many of these are included in the most common licenses out there. So there's a really good chance that you have most of these applications just sitting there waiting for you to tap into.
Yeah, that's a good point. Microsoft wants to move people to this platform. And I agree. They see this as the future. It's decentralized. It's cloud-based. People are working from anywhere. And this is the right kind of platform we want to have folks on, and the costs are less. Like I said, there's a lot of savings here. You're not maintaining your own infrastructure anymore. To incentivize that, SharePoint licensing is included in that base Microsoft Basic $5 a month plan. So they're getting their email, they're getting Teams, and they're getting SharePoint all for that $5 a month. And that's just thrown in there. So let's take advantage of it. It's also very secure. We're going to look at some of the security features there too. But I know, there's always a concern, obviously, moving data to the cloud of how secure is it. It's Microsoft, luckily. So one of the things that I like to point out to people, if you read about the SolarWinds hack in December, who did SolarWinds call in to investigate the hack? So who did a cybersecurity company call in to help them figure out what happened? They called Microsoft. That was the first call. Microsoft is the expert at this type of security, and they do a lot of things to protect your data. We'll take a look at that too.
Russell, I want to add just one more cherry on top of that, because this is something you and I talk about every day. In addition to being a managed IT company, we're also a cybersecurity company. We do a lot of compliance work. And the big compliance thing in 2021 is what's called Cyber Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC. Now, that is exclusively for government contractors. So many of you listening to this presentation probably never heard of that and will never have to. But the reason I bring it up is CMMC is arguably the most complex compliance guideline out there. It's very sophisticated. It has over 130 checkoff points that you have to key in. And one of the things that we have learned from Word One is Google is not CMMC approved, but Microsoft is. So that speaks volumes to the level of security, because this is coming directly from the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense is saying, we need our government contractors to be more secure. So if the Department of Defense is endorsing this through the CMMC model, know that your business, from a security standpoint, is in excellent hands.
Absolutely. Well said. So first off, SharePoint's an intranet site. And there's a lot of value here. So think about the stuff that you're constantly being asked for. Think about the information that everybody in the company needs to know at any given moment. And how much time you might have to spend emailing things to people or answering their questions. And can some of those issues be permanently evolved and there and available for people on an intranet site, so they're not interrupting you or your HR team or your accounting team. And that's a great use of it. So very often we kind of set this as the homepage. So our own company, here's our screenshot. We're an IT company. We use a lot of tools, obviously, to do our job. When we have a new staff member start, rather than having to bookmark a dozen different websites for them and create links to the various tools they need, we bookmark their homepage, our SharePoint site, with all the tools right there. So they can immediately get to everything when they sit down in the morning. We also put things like company news, new clients that have signed on with us, staff changes, welcoming new employees. We also have things like forms. So HR forms, time off forms, reimbursement forms. So all those little documents that everybody in the company may need to get access to. We also put our company employee handbook and our operating system manual. We're an IT company, we have to call it that. But your employee handbook, best practices, policies, these things need to be posted, they need to be accessible. This is a great place to do that. Not just because it's there and available, but because it's also easy to update. So, You don't need to be a programmer to go in and add a new link to the links page or to add a news item. It's basically as simple as Word. You go in, you click a little edit pencil, and you can type your new news item. We can build very nice ones. This is a demo site that we've set up for a company with news and events going on, strategies, reporting. Very useful for that. The other part is we also link that to different teams. So most of our clients, they've got teams of people in the organization, and not everybody in the company needs access to accounts payable, for instance. So we'll set up what's called a spoke or sub-site for that team where they can have their own documents and their own information and maybe their own schedules or best practices or procedures laid out. And most companies, they'll have a hub or a home site, which, like I said, usually gets set as people's bookmarked homepage in their browser. And then there will be spoke sites for different departments, project teams, or organizational teams.
And Russell, one of my favorite things about that is you can even have people from outside of your company. So Russell and I worked on a landscaping company about a year and a half ago that had recognized that they were using entirely too much paper, from signing contracts to showing plans, editing proposals. And we helped them build a SharePoint site where they could keep their contracts. And when a customer was ready to buy, they could simply send them a link, and then the customer could open that link and it would have the document right there. They could sign it online, and it never actually left the SharePoint site. They were just being given permission-based access to that portal for a period of time so that they could sign the document and even make changes to the document. You can set the ability for them to do that as well. So really, if you're thinking about getting away from paper and going digital, this is a great way to do it.
We also see, and I think you'll see this, we see SharePoint and 365 replacing a lot of separate products that people are using. So just like 365, if you're carrying a separate license for Zoom, well, Teams is included in 365. And a lot of our clients have been able to stop paying for Zoom because they're already getting that video conference platform with Teams. SharePoint's a lot like that too. So Mike kind of touched on collaboration. We're getting there in a second, but clients are saying, hey, we're not using a file share, we're not using Dropbox anymore. We don't need to carry that extra cost because SharePoint can duplicate that functionality. We can securely share files with our clients or partners, and we don't need to pay for this extra license and extra cost on top of that. It's a file server. So this is probably the easiest place to start with SharePoint because everybody knows how a file server works and what it is. That you're not really introducing a new concept to your staff. You're just changing where those files are located. So instead of a server in your office, those files are up in Microsoft. But you get some really cool additional benefits. So one is you get a lot of storage to start with. And again, it's built in. You're not paying anything extra out of pocket for it. You've already paid for that with your email licensing. So everybody gets a terabyte of storage. It depends on the industry. We've obviously got some exceptions, like architecture firms are going to have more in that, but most businesses and most of our clients typically have a terabyte or less of files when you add up all their Word documents and PDFs and proposals. They also add each person you add onto your company 365 account, they immediately add on an extra 10 gigabytes of storage. So that adds up very quickly as well. You have 100 people in your company, you've already added another terabyte. And then you can get additional storage very cheaply at any time. So space really isn't an issue here, and space is scalable. You need more space, it's very easy to add, and organically it's going to grow with you as your organization grows, which I really like.
What? So you mean you don't have to forklift some old software and buy it again in 5 years?
No, exactly. Exactly.
Because we've not seen that before.
one thing I love is that SharePoint is accessible anywhere. Obviously, that's become really important to all of us in the last year. That you have staff working at home, you have staff working at field offices, you have staff working from hotels, and because it's cloud, because it's through this website interface, you can pull it up from anywhere. You don't need things like VPNs to access SharePoint. Microsoft is managing that security through their own protocols. And one thing I like too is that, yes, you can access files from the SharePoint website, and which we see up here in the right. You can also access files right in your computer through your Windows or Mac Explorer, or Windows Explorer Mac Finder, just like you do now. Just like you access files on your computer, just like you access files on the server. And that's been one of the biggest changes with SharePoint. If you were using it a few years ago, that process used to be awkward and cumbersome if it worked well at all. Microsoft has put a lot of time into this. So if you've got staff, and usually it's the older staff, but if you've got staff that are sort of scared or worried about working off a website to manage files, that's okay. They don't need to. They can do it right off a sync with their local computer. And we see that down here, over here, Advantage Industries. So those are SharePoint sites. So these don't exist on a server. They don't exist on my computer. All those files are with Microsoft, but I can access them the same way I would access a file right in my downloads folder. It's that simple and easy. Just double click it, it opens. When I save, it saves it and it syncs it back up to Microsoft SharePoint Cloud. So it should not be any harder to use for your staff as a document library than using the server. And that's been one of the big kind of revelations for people when we've been talking with them in the past year, I think, Mike.
Yeah, and Russell, for companies that have staff on the go, so in a traditional environment, Russell and I would be out face to face with 5 or 6 clients a week, typically to do site surveys and discovery meetings and such. As the saying goes, there's an app for that. So whether you're an Apple user or you're a Microsoft user or you like Android for your tablets or your smartphones, you can get the SharePoint app on practically any device that you want. And then it's already been multi-factor authenticated, so you have that nice layer of security, and you can click and go from wherever you are, even if there isn't a laptop or a computer nearby.
Well, and one thing I like too, which is nice to have and your server won't let you do, is you can work, 2 people or more can work on a document at the same time. So Mike could open this PowerPoint presentation. I would see a little Mike icon in the upper right of my PowerPoint screen, and I could see changes he's making. He could see changes I'm making.
You're not going to tell the Excel story, are you?
I could. We're going to get to that. Version control is right here, and we can see that a little bit. So thank you, Mike, for breaking the ice there. This was, I don't know, probably about a month after Mike had joined Advantage. And we had done a beautiful, very carefully formatted Excel spreadsheet of our product and services matrix. So what's included in our advanced plan versus our basic, what are the add-ons available, those kinds of things. And very carefully formatted and aligned just so.
But I didn't like it.
Mike didn't like it, right? Mike didn't realize that, SharePoint's a live document. So he went on and was like, I'm gonna reformat. I'm gonna, adjust this spreadsheet around and I'm gonna, so I can print it this way. And so Mike got a copy he liked, and I hopped on later that day and freaked out because I needed to print off this spreadsheet and it looks all wrong. So I was like, what do I do? Well, luckily we use SharePoint for document storage. So I was actually able to simply right-click a file in the website and go to version history. And we could see that here. So I could see, who made changes to the document and when. I can preview those changes. And so I was able to sit there and say, well, yesterday, Mike changed the Excel spreadsheet. And so I was able to tease them about it immediately, which was a nice thing. But B, I was able to go and just click a pull down and say restore version. And so within 2 minutes, I had the file back the way I wanted.
The correct one.
If Mike, now let's say, but Mike, if he liked those changes, Mike can still download. It'll track my version change too. It'll show my restore. So Mike could still go and download a copy of his changed file and probably put it back up on the website with a new name. So it'd be, product matrix / Mike version or something like that. But I love that power and capability. Our clients like it too, because
I was
a lot of
grateful for it
times,
that day.
yeah, and you're fine, but it wasn't a big deal, right? It could have been a big deal, but SharePoint made it a non-event. And I love that. One of the other things I like is that, lost my train of thought. We'll come back to that. But no, it like I said, it made it what could have been an upsetting thing, a non-event, very easy to manage and use, very handy to go back. That's my point. Our clients like it too, because previously, let's say somebody accidentally deleted a file on the server. Maybe it was somebody in the accounting department and 5 people need that file. Currently, they would have to open a ticket with us to say, hey, please restore this file. Because that kind of access to the backup platform is restricted. In this case, they can restore the file themselves. They don't need to wait for us, which is nice. Now, they could still call us to restore it, and some companies do, but we also have a lot of clients where they know what they're doing. They just hop in there, boom, restore the file. They're back in action in 2 minutes. Yeah, love that stuff. Yes, we're touching on this. It's collaborative. So we have touched on this a little bit, but it's collaborative in a secure way. And that's very important. So like I said, you can share files from any interface. That's one of the constant refrains you'll see today is, like Mike said, it does not matter what platform you're on. You can access it and you can carry out these activities. Doesn't care if you're Android, Mac, iPhone, Windows computer. So you can share files. It's granular sharing. So you can be very specific in how you share the file and who you share it to. You can share it to only specific people. You can share it with people in or outside the organization. You can choose what type of access they have to that file. So can they only read a copy of it, or can they also edit it and make changes? So you can set all these things. So this over here on the right is just from my computer, right-click to file and chose share. And these are the options I get. So I can specify specific people. I can send a general link to anybody that anybody could open. I can allow editing or not. And I can even prevent people from downloading a copy of it if I don't want them to be able to do that. I just want to be able to view it in the web browser. So very powerful. And by default, links disappear after 30 days. So there's a built-in sort of time. Folks, had a little hiccup there. There's a built-in sort of time, and it'll expire. Now we can adjust that time. So you can choose to set a presentation or link to expire after only 3 days, for instance, if it's time sensitive. And I like that flexibility too. And then, as we already mentioned, you can collaborate in real time. So we will send documents to clients where we may need to fill out some information. They do as well. We're not emailing back and forth anymore. They're using the link. They're updating the live document, which every party has access to. Saves a lot of time and saves a lot of those back and forth emails.
And Russell, you hinted at this a couple minutes ago. Again, everything we're showing you is part of your current 365 license. So if you want to dive in and start building a SharePoint site today, you certainly can. And as Russell has pointed out, you can't blow it up. So you can experiment with it, and you can, does this work for our company? And now, certainly, an organization like us, we are here to help you. We have SharePoint experts on staff to help you build your vision as well as your end objective. But this is something that you don't need an engineering degree or engineering staff for. If you know your way around SharePoint environments, or even if you're comfortable with Microsoft, you start playing. It's an adult sandbox, and you'll be impressed at how quickly you can start building things that are really useful, not only to yourself but to your staff as well as your clients.
Absolutely. SharePoint's also an application hub, and think again a little bit of like the servers. So your server's hosting files, but it's also hosting an accounting program or database software. It could be Sage, something like that. And SharePoint's also the same too. It is sort of a back-end hub for a whole suite of applications, which we're really not going to get too much into today. We're focusing on where do most people start today. But that doesn't mean you can't build it out. I like to joke with people, SharePoint, the document sharing in SharePoint is the part of the iceberg above the waterline. And there's a whole lot more down below that you can build and add on to. And there's some very powerful tools that are available. So, we've already mentioned Teams. That's a front end for SharePoint. Integration with the Office suite. So right now, I can save this PowerPoint presentation directly to SharePoint, which is what I did. I don't need to navigate the website or anything. I can do it right in PowerPoint and just see my sites and locations just like I would on a server. Integrates with your emails. So my SharePoint credentials are my email credentials, are my computer credentials, and my server credentials. So we can build everything in together so people don't need to remember yet another password. But it had some really interesting applications. There are a lot of third-party applications building tools. Microsoft is a huge ecosystem in just the same way that QuickBooks builds software that runs on Windows computers. Companies like that are also building SharePoint applications that will run in this ecosystem. And there are a lot of third-party vendors and applications. And so there's a decent chance that if you have a powerful piece of software that your company is using already, an ERP system, they may already have a SharePoint module that ties into this system and platform. So data from your enterprise reporting program or enterprise resource planning program can get automatically to SharePoint without you having to manually enter it. There's a lot of governance, security, and compliance controls. So we're going to get to that a little bit more in another slide, but SharePoint's compliant with a huge number of security frameworks because Microsoft's target audience is the world, basically. They know they need to play with different security frameworks. They know that they need to play in different fields and areas. So 365 SharePoint, if you're a medical practice, a medical provider, it's HIPAA compliant. There's a BAA form, and you just literally go to your admin portal and print it out to file it with your documents for your HIPAA stuff.
Yeah, Russell, I have a great personal experience with that. A large medical facility, who shall remain nameless, did not do that. So for your listening audience here, I had to go to see the doctor a few weeks ago. And I'm sure every one of you has experienced this, that when you go to see the doctor, they want you to fill out that form. Your address, your date of birth, your social security number, all your illness history, any surgeries you've had, all this, which under HIPAA is personal health information, which has to be delivered securely. They just sent me an email with a Word doc and said, fill this out and send it back to us. I was shocked. Now, if they had just taken the time to take advantage of the SharePoint application that they're using, that they have within their 365 license, they could have sent me that link specifically to me, and I could have filled the documents out in a safe and HIPAA compliant environment.
And that would have come across like you've gotten emails from your bank or health insurance where, it's an encrypted email. You need to sign in to access it. That's all built in. That's baked into SharePoint if you want to utilize that.
Yeah, fantastic security at your fingertips. It really is.
Absolutely. There's also a lot of customized software solutions, and we do some of these for clients. So I have a client that is is going to be doing testing samples for the healthcare industry. Not patient data, but doing tests on drugs and compounds coming out of applications. Well, that data is going to be fed into SharePoint. That's going to be the data repository for that because it's secure and it's version controlled and it's backed up and it's easily accessible. And we can transmit data directly from their vendors through application integration directly to SharePoint. So they don't need to manually enter the stuff they get over. It gets automatically put into SharePoint and then they can add their notes to it as they go. And so there are opportunities. I think one of the things you'll see is there's some immediate cost savings potential if you're transitioning from a server to SharePoint, but there are long-term sort of process productivity benefits can be gained. So are there workflows that, like Mike said, have too much paper right now? Are there workflows that get lost or they touch too many people? Can we build things in SharePoint to manage that? Yes, one of the great things about SharePoint is there's a whole suite and set of automated workflow tools you can do. So when person A does this, it gets filed to this folder and assigned to person B. When something comes in from this email address or is filled out by this form, it automatically gets sent to this location. Very nice. One of the things I also like to mention is this is how Microsoft is building out some of their other tools. So Microsoft Project, we have a lot of contractors that use it. It's very expensive software historically, and you'd have to build a server installation to sort of share the project files. Now you can do a project license for through Microsoft 365. You do it on a month-by-month basis. If your project's over, you can return the license. But that data is stored now in the SharePoint cloud, and all your contractors or your clients who need access to the project materials, well, they will access it right on the SharePoint website. They don't need a full license. You don't need to spend $30 a month or a one-time $900 for that. You can spend $7 a month. They hop on the SharePoint website. They see all the things they need to do for their project tasks. Doesn't matter where they are, doesn't matter what platform they're on. So we could see Microsoft building that ecosystem out. It's big now. It's going to keep getting bigger. They're going to keep adding things to this portfolio. Secure. So again, like I said, Microsoft's an expert in security. And like I said, that's who big companies call in when they need help. And we put a lot of faith in their abilities. There are a lot of things, and one of the things I like to start is think about how your server is managed, ideally, and that not everybody in the company has access to every file. You've got sensitive documents that you don't want, the junior employee seeing. Normally on a server, that's set up with security groups. So, there's an accounting group. It has these 6 people in it. Only the accounting group is allowed access to this folder on the server. SharePoint builds on that same Microsoft technology and expertise. So you're going to configure it the same way. If you've configured, or your IT provider has configured this on a server, they can configure it on SharePoint. We build it out in the same way. So great. Here's our accounting group again. It's these 6 people. They're the only ones who can access the accounting site and documents. And again, you can really drill down. So you can say, hey, our company page with these HR forms, the HR department has editing permissions. None of the other departments can edit the documents. They can just read them or print them out. So I love that capability because security is not just the external, it's the internal as well. And SharePoint is very good at both the external security barrier, but as well, it's probably the best at the internal security barriers for your organization. One of the other big things we love is 2-factor authentication. We talked about this in our 5 things you can do security-wise that are low-hanging fruit and easy to do. Microsoft 365 builds multi-factor authentication in. So yes, it's your email address, it's your password, and the key from your phone. and that can be done through a text or an application. Very easy to set up. It's built, again, it's built into Microsoft. It doesn't cost you anything to add to your licensing, but it protects all your files. It's probably protecting files better than your company server is, which most clients are still, now we do have clients that are in the defense industry, for instance, that use multi-factor to access their computer or server, but I'm betting most people don't, and most of you don't. So think about, so it's actually harder to get to this stuff as a bad guy than it is on your server if they were in your office. One of the other things I like too is that, the first thing people always ask is, oh my God, Russell, am I going to have to type in this stupid code every day or multiple times a day? No, you don't. Just like with your 365 email and Outlook, Microsoft is going to remember devices that you use regularly as a trusted device or trusted computer. And you're only going to have to multi-factor authenticate every 90 days or so. But when you're sitting down at somebody else's computer, you got to type it in. And the important thing is a hacker steals your password. Maybe you got phished or one of your employees got tricked into handing it over. They can't get into that employee's email. They can't get into your company data either without that person's phone. And we've seen this happen before. I've been able to look at sign-in logs and see like, oh yes, Tom got tricked into handing his password over, and I can see there's somebody in Ghana repeatedly trying to access his account, can't get anywhere because they don't have his phone. So we love that security layer. And then compliance. So like Mike said, this is Microsoft plays everywhere. They work with all industries and they work with all compliance frameworks. So, documentation needed for HIPAA, GDPR, DoD, CMMC, NIST, really any of these compliance frameworks are going to play well with. They're going to have documentation. There may be specific instructions or extra security rules you need to enable, but those security rules are there and you can enable them.
Yeah, Russell, just one quick point on that, because we get a lot of people that say to us, well, I'm not a medical office and I'm not a government contractor. And so, I don't have any specific compliance requirements. So the first answer to that is, if you take credit cards, the answer is yes. So PCI applies to probably 90% of businesses out there. Even as an IT company, we take credit cards. That's part of our billing process for our clients. But if you are one of those rare unicorns that does not even accept credit cards, so you don't fall directly under PCI requirements, every state has cybersecurity laws. And in the event that you are breached, you can be audited by the state to make sure that you are following best practices and guidelines. So using the Microsoft Suite and SharePoint in particular in this example is a great way to show that you're making reasonable and appropriate actions to prevent breaches.
Well, and even aside that, think about how valuable is your company data?
Yep.
What happens if, ransomware gets put on your server? Things like that. So, you need access to that data. Are you worried about that data getting out to anywhere? So even aside from compliance regimes, it's important to protect your data. We like compliance frameworks because they make you jump through extra hoops to be more secure. So we're actually a fan of a lot of these compliance frameworks. There's some effort to enable them, but it's good effort that pays off in protecting the organization. And it's affordable. So this is the good stuff. So licensing is inexpensive. Like we said, it's already included in most 365 plans, unless you're on a very old plan typically. We have moved several clients either to smaller servers or off servers altogether in the past year because they've been able to utilize SharePoint. So we've had some clients where, just based on the types of documents used, like a marketing company, we shut down their server last year. They are entirely in the SharePoint ecosystem. And it is, managing their users, it is managing their permissions, but they don't have a box in their office. which they need to worry about. They don't have a warranty they need to renew. They don't have, $5,000 of hardware and $5,000 of labor to take care of every 10 or every 5 years. So major cost savings there. The other thing is we'll see, maybe we have a server on site still to manage local security or be a print server, but all of a sudden that's a very cheap server instead of an expensive one, because we don't need to add in all the high capacity drives for storage anymore. So maybe that's a $3,000 or $4,000 server instead of a $7,000 or $8,000 server.
Yeah, Russell, I'm thinking of a client that you and I brought on last summer.
Mm-hmm.
We went to meet with their CFO as well as their office manager. And their original reach out to us was, one, they weren't terribly happy with their current managed service provider, and they needed new servers. And when Russell and I looked at their servers, I think they were at 97 or 98% capacity of those. And they said, we're going to have to buy something soon. And they were basically swapping data around to make room so they could survive. And we said, well, why don't you use SharePoint? And they looked at us, what do you mean? We have all this available storage. I said, it won't solve all your problems, but we can certainly offload quite a bit of that. And so now maybe you don't have to buy a server. We don't have to configure one for you. And they said, you're the first company that suggested that to us. And that was a big part of why they decided to do business with us, because we weren't simply trying to sell them a server, but we recognized, hey, there's an opportunity here to take advantage of a resource that they're already paying for that has ample storage. And like Russell said, a terabyte, it's a lot of space to play with. Mm-hmm. And we were allowed, we bought them significant time because the servers themselves weren't old. They were just full.
And we're dealing with working with another client right now who's a nonprofit. They actually get this for SharePoint and 365 licensing for free. So if you're 501c3 nonprofit, this doesn't cost you anything. And we're still going to do a small server there. They've got a couple local sort of databases they need to use, but we're going to cut the cost of that project in half, literally, by also utilizing SharePoint. So that's very key. VPN licenses, again, you don't need those if you're accessing stuff in SharePoint. And then setting it up is more simple and less time consuming than doing a server project. We can kind of set up a company homepage, a hub, and 3 sites, typically in 15 hours on average, which is usually less than configuring, quite a bit less than configuring a server and all the policies and rules that one needs to implement to make it run securely. So the process. So how do you get started? Let's say you're interested in this. What do you do? So I recommend start with that document site. Start with how do we turn the shared drive in the server into a SharePoint site, because it's the easiest thing for people to wrap their heads around. And it's the easiest workflow change to make, because if they're using that sync, your staff isn't going to work any differently than they are now. Instead of the S drive on the server, it's going to be a SharePoint site, but they will access it in the same way. They'll see it on their computer in the same way. They'll save stuff to it in the same way. And it really doesn't change anything for them. So it's easy to implement, it's easy to conceptually understand, and it's easy to train your staff in. So we think that's a great jumping off point. And then I say, so write a wish list. And this does not need to be technical. You know your organization and how you work better than your IT company or an external vendor that you work with. So this should be, from your perspective, what are the things we want to have? How do we work? Let's lay that out. And this could be as simple as a piece of paper and drawing some pictures like, hey, here's our home page and it's going to have XYZ, and we're going to have sites for each department and they're going to have these things, and here's a picture of it. Workflows you use, and like I said, don't worry about making it technical. Our job is to realize the technical portion. Then I say schedule your meeting with your IT provider or department. And what they're going to do in that meeting, they're going to take what you've sort of laid out. And if you're not sure yet, that's okay too. They'll kind of ask you we like asking leading questions, have it to get people to think a little outside the box and what they could want to do with a site. But our job at that point is to say, okay, well, here's what you want. We've laid it out. It's going to take us, 18 hours to build this for you. Do you like it? You'll sign off on that at that point, assuming you do. And we use the agile process. So we're going to take what you gave us, we're going to build it for you in SharePoint. Then we're going to have another meeting to sit down and say, here's what we built. What do you like? What don't you like? What would you like us to change? So we'll make any tweaks you want. We'll send it back to you. We'll repeat that process as many times as needed to get it nailed down. And when you say, hey, this is what we want, this is what we have in mind, we like this, great. Then, this is absolutely critical, we do training for your staff. Especially if you've had, like we talked about earlier, if you've had folks that were burned on SharePoint 10 years ago, they're going to need this because they're probably freaking out as soon as you told them, hey, we're going to do SharePoint. And they remember how difficult it used to be to use and navigate. What we're going to see is, so a tool is only good if people know how to use it and they're comfortable doing so. So our projects always include a training component. We'll do some basically training with the department heads. We will produce documentation on simple things. If you tell us, hey, like this one client we mentioned, we need to be able to send these contract documents to clients and get them signed back, we're going to train that specific procedure for your staff. So they're very familiar, they know what to do, they know how to do it well, and they know how to do it safely, and they're comfortable doing it. So we do a lot of hand holding for folks, and I think that's very key. But the nice thing is, this is not a sea change. This is not hugely different from how you're working now. We want to make it easy for folks though. Let's see. So once we've done the training, then it's time to schedule a go live. And usually we'll say, we'll work that out with you. What's a good day for you? And so it'd be, hey, next Wednesday, we're going to reboot all the computers Wednesday night. Thursday morning, when you come in, you're not going to see your server drives anymore, but you will see these SharePoint sites on your computer. And that's where you're going to start working. And we're going to sync that data all over for you. We're going to recheck it Wednesday night too to make sure that recent copy from the server is the same one they would see in SharePoint. We'll help you with that data migration process, of course. We also have clients that do it themselves, and that can be very simple. Again, since SharePoint is on your file explorer, since the server is right there on your computer, it can be as simple as drag and drop. Like, I'm just going to take these folders from the server to SharePoint, and you just wait a few minutes for that data to upload. Another thing I like to point out is that SharePoint should evolve. It's what we like to call living document. So as your organization grows, as you make changes, as new workflows or new business happen, you're going to want to make changes to SharePoint. Maybe that's adding a new site. Maybe it's changing the way a site works. Maybe it's one of these more powerful tools like, hey, we want to start using some business intelligence software, or we needed to pull data from our Salesforce or Epicor system into SharePoint so we can run some analytics on it. So there could be some kind of big, more complex issues down the road, but keep these changes in mind. Like Mike said, kind of content updates. So think about that homepage. If I want to put up, hey, we want to welcome Killian to our team because he joined last month, that's simple enough for your staff to do. They can hop on, there's a little edit pencil if that person has permissions, and they can put in that content and upload Killian's photo. And that's usually what most of our clients do. So there'll be somebody at the client or a few people at the client that kind of maintains the content. And then major changes and even the layout change, if they want to do it on that website, so they want to, take the calendar off or move the calendar to the right instead of the left side of the page. That's something that's very easy to do and usually internal staff can handle. If you want us to handle it, we can do that. Major changes we'll usually set up, so additional sites, site permissions, if you're having an issue with that, that's the kind of thing that we like helping folks out with, but we're available there. And like I said, you can start adding on interesting workflows. So you can set up rules again that, hey, a document is sent to our client. When we receive that document, there's a workflow rule that actually sends a copy of that document or sends a notification that the document's been signed to the client by these 5 people and triggers a new document to be created for the processing side. So you can get very sophisticated there and do some things to help you out. Also, you want to tie SharePoint into other programs, maybe, so that's that API interface, third-party software. But
So,
yeah,
Russell,
it grows with you.
As always, you've done a fantastic job with the presentation today. We did have one comment from the
Sure.
audience, which I'm sure you can address,
Mm-hmm.
but working in SharePoint is a little different, and Excel is a great example. Not everything works, it appears the same way in SharePoint. So it's good to know that ahead of time, because it can be a little disorienting the first time that you click around in it. So thank you, Peggy, for that comment.
Yeah, so let me give you a little example here. This is the SharePoint site. This is in the business development team at Advantage. I have different sites here on the left. And as you can see, I'm accessing it just like it's a server drive. I can go into here. We wrote a client letter about 2-factor authentication because it's so important. So we're trying to get all of our clients onto this. I have options. So as you saw here, I opened it and it immediately opened in Word on my desktop, just like any other file. And if I save it, it saves almost in real time, and it saves it right back to SharePoint as I'm editing it. I also have the option let's say I was coming from the website, and what you'll see here is interesting. So here's that same document in the online version of Word. And Microsoft is an online version of all their programs. So if I was going from the SharePoint website, from the document library, it would first open that Word document here. And I could do probably 80 or 90% of anything I want to do. This is nice too. If you're on the road or you're on your tablet, you may not have Word installed on that computer. So you can actually get in and edit that document on the website and do most things. But we can see here in the bar up here, it's a little more limited in functionality than Word. That's not a problem. So right here where it says editing, I can click open in desktop app, and it will open in the desktop version of Word. And doesn't matter where I make my changes, it's all going to sync back to Microsoft. Does that help answer your question? Really, you can work, I think Microsoft's design philosophy has always been, we're going to give you 5 ways to do anything so you can pick the way that works best for you personally.
Yeah, I think
so
as much
if you are a web person, we'll find a lot of younger folks, maybe they use this or G Suite at their college. They're very comfortable using the web interface, and they may even prefer it. A lot of folks, like myself included, prefer using Word. And either way, doesn't matter, all the changes sync back.
Yeah, I think just the important point, which is what Peggy was saying, is they're different.
Mm-hmm.
And once you are aware of those differences, it makes it a lot easier to know when you should work directly through SharePoint or when you want to work on locally on your own laptop or device. But yes, Russell, again, fantastic job. And to our viewing audience today, thank you for taking the time to listen and to participate. And as always, thank you, Allie. Thank you, Courtney, and much gratitude to the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce for allowing us to do this every day.
And they're on my move to SharePoint list too. So.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thank you to everyone who joined us. And I just want to mention our next webinar with Advantage will be on March 17th, and it will be about public speaking. So
yep, Russell and I are going to reverse roles again.
Yep. Yep. So we're looking forward to that. And yeah, thanks for joining us. This was great.
Thanks, everybody. Always
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.